Scott Hall was one of wrestling's most charismatic performers, revolutionizing the business when he formed the NWO. He went from being a struggling mid-carder to becoming the bad guy Razor Ramon, a cultural icon who carried the Intercontinental Championship with style and swagger. In 2022, at 63 years old, he passed away after being taken off life support. Scott Hall was no doubt one of the greatest, but one question remains unanswered. Why WWE never gave him a world title run? In 1958, Scott Oliver Hall was born in St. Mary's County, Maryland, beginning a nomadic childhood that few could imagine. As the son of a military man constantly receiving new orders, young Scott found himself uprooted and replanted in unfamiliar soil nearly every year until he was 15. Though wrestling captivated his imagination from an early age, the path to the squared circle wasn't immediately clear. After graduation, Scott drifted through life like a ship without anchor, taking whatever work would pay the bills. His imposing frame and natural intimidation factor made him perfect for security work, and he found steady employment guarding the doors of various bars and nightclubs, keeping watch over the rowdy nightlife scene. But fate has a way of violently redirecting our paths when we least expect it. In 1983, while working security at an Orlando nightclub, Hall's life changed forever during one fateful shift. What began as routine crowd control escalated into a life-or-death struggle that ended with Hall firing his weapon in self-defense. The patron died from his wounds. Though initially charged with second-degree murder, the case was eventually dismissed when investigators confirmed Hall had acted to protect himself. But legal exoneration couldn't erase the psychological damage. This traumatic incident would cast a long shadow across Hall's future. His closest confidant, Kevin Nash, would later point to this moment as the catalyst for the demons that would eventually hunt Hall throughout his career, the addiction issues that nearly consumed him. How do you move forward when you've taken a life, even justifiably? It's a question Hall would spend decades trying to answer. Seeking escape and reinvention, Hall made the pivotal decision to pursue professional wrestling in 1984. Championship Wrestling from Florida recognized the untapped potential in this physically imposing newcomer with natural charisma. Immediately, they thrust him into the spotlight with a high-profile feud against the legendary Dusty Rhodes, baptism by fire for any wrestling rookie. What followed was a wrestling education unlike any other, as Hall traversed the territory system alongside tag team partner Dan Spivey, absorbing different styles and approaches, building the foundation for what would become one of wrestling's most influential careers. In 1985, after bouncing between promotions like a pinball, including stops at Jim Crockett Promotions in the Carolinas and Midwest Wrestling Association in Missouri, Hall landed in what many consider wrestling's prestigious finishing school, Vern Gaines' American Wrestling Association. This wasn't just another territory. The AWA stood as one of wrestling's powerhouse organizations, a breeding ground for superstars where legends were forged. Here, Hall underwent his first major character transformation. Who was this mustachioed powerhouse commanding attention? None other than Magnum Scott Hall, a fan favorite whose uncanny resemblance to television heartthrob Tom Selleck became his calling card. Behind the scenes, something remarkable was happening. Vern Gaines, with his legendary eye for talent, saw something special in Hall that few others had recognized. Whispers circulated throughout the locker room that Gagne believed he'd discovered his next Hulk Hogan, the superstar who'd slipped through his fingers years earlier. How serious was Gagne about this vision? Serious enough to personally instruct Hall to incorporate Hogan-esque moves and mannerisms into his performances, hoping lightning might strike twice. The strategy initially paid dividends. Hall's career trajectory soared as he formed a formidable partnership with the technically brilliant Curt Hennig, creating magic in the ring night after night. When that alliance eventually dissolved, Hall didn't miss a beat, transitioning seamlessly into singles competition where he quickly ascended the ranks. Before long, this former drifter found himself standing across the ring from legendary champions like the fearsome Stan Hansen and the technically superior Rick Martel, challenging for wrestling's most coveted prize, the AWA World Championship. What made Hall different from other physically imposing wrestlers wasn't just his look or his size. It was an intangible quality that made fans believe in him, a natural charisma that couldn't be taught. Though championship gold remained just beyond his grasp during this period, something more valuable was happening. Scott Hall was becoming a complete performer, developing the tools that would eventually make him one of wrestling's most influential figures. By 1989, Scott Hall's wrestling instincts weren't limited to the ring. His business acumen had sharpened too. Despite his growing popularity in the AWA, Hall recognized the warning signs: dwindling crowds, bounced paychecks, and an organization struggling to stay relevant in a rapidly changing industry. The once mighty AWA was taking on water fast. Would you stay aboard a sinking vessel when your career was at stake? What followed was a professional wrestler's version of a world tour, as Hall transformed himself into a wrestling nomad, testing waters across the globe. His journey began with a 6-month stint at World Championship Wrestling, where he first crossed paths with the Atlanta-based promotion that would later define his legacy. But the odyssey was just beginning. Like a master craftsman seeking new techniques, Hall expanded his wrestling education overseas. He battled in the technically demanding rings of New Japan Pro Wrestling, where Western showmanship met Eastern fighting spirit. Then it was off to Germany's Catch Wrestling Association, where the hard-hitting European style added new weapons to his arsenal. The sun-soaked arenas of Puerto Rico's World Wrestling Council saw him perform before passionate Caribbean crowds. He even participated in a WWE tryout that, puzzlingly, didn't immediately lead to a contract. What were they missing that they'd later regret? By 1991, Hall's compass pointed him back to WCW, where his evolution continued with the birth of the Diamond Stud, a character dripping with arrogance and machismo that channeled the cocky essence of Rick Rude. With the flamboyant Diamond Dallas Page as his manager and mouthpiece, this new incarnation of Hall cut through WCW's mid-card talent like Tommy Rich and Tom Zenk with devastating efficiency. It was during this return to WCW that wrestling history quietly began writing its most influential chapter. Hall formed a brief but significant partnership with another imposing figure using the moniker Vinny Vegas, none other than Kevin Nash. Though neither man could have known it then, this temporary alliance was merely the prelude to a friendship that would eventually reshape the wrestling industry. Despite finding his groove in WCW, when opportunity knocked in the form of a WWE contract in May 1992, Hall didn't hesitate. Sometimes success requires perfect timing, and Hall sensed that his moment had arrived. With his bags packed and his sights set on the biggest wrestling company in the world, Scott Hall prepared to answer the most important call of his career, one that would transform him from a wrestling journeyman into a household name. In May 1992, Scott Hall stepped onto WWE's grand stage as Razor Ramon, a character that would forever change wrestling history. But here's what makes it fascinating. This wasn't just another gimmick handed down from creative. The slick-talking, gold chain-wearing bad guy sprang directly from Hall's own imagination after immersing himself in Al Pacino's iconic portrayal of Tony Montana in Scarface. How many wrestlers create their own defining personas? Say hello to the bad guy. With those words, delivered in his perfect Pacino-inspired Cuban accent, Hall instantly captivated audiences. While other newcomers struggled to find their footing, Razor Ramon exploded onto the scene with a fully realized character. His methodical dismantling of WWE's undercard talent wasn't just about winning matches. It was calculated character building that made him look absolutely lethal. Each toothpick flicked at fallen opponents told a story of arrogance and superiority that audiences couldn't ignore. Something unexpected started happening during those early months. Despite being positioned as a villain, fans couldn't help but admire him. What makes certain bad guys so irresistible? Razor's swagger, confidence, and undeniable coolness made him one of wrestling's earliest examples of a cool heel. Someone fans secretly cheered despite their villainous actions. His perfectly slicked-back hair, dazzling gold chains, and signature catchphrases created an aura that transcended traditional wrestling roles. WWE recognized they had something special and wasted no time throwing their new acquisition into the deep end. On September 14, 1992, primetime wrestling viewers witnessed Razor Ramon insert himself into wrestling royalty when he cost the beloved Macho Man Randy Savage a crucial match against the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Interfering against a legend like Savage wasn't just any debut feud. It was an immediate signal that management viewed Hall as main event material. This high-profile rivalry culminated at that year's Survivor Series, where the wrestling world witnessed something extraordinary: a tag team collision featuring Razor and Flair battling against Savage and Mr. Perfect. Can you imagine a better spotlight for a newcomer? Sharing the ring with three certified legends, Hall didn't just keep pace, he belonged there. The match accomplished exactly what it needed to, establishing Razor Ramon as more than just another new face. He was a superstar destined for greatness. Behind that confident smirk and those intimidating eyes, Scott Hall was proving what insiders had long suspected. He possessed one of wrestling's most brilliant creative minds. His innate understanding of character development, psychology, and presentation was creating something that would resonate with fans for decades to come. Little did anyone know, Razor Ramon was just the beginning of Scott Hall's revolutionary impact on professional wrestling. Following his impressive showing against Macho Man, Vince McMahon fast-tracked Razor Ramon straight into WWE's championship picture. The 1993 Royal Rumble saw the bad guy challenge none other than technical mastermind Bret Hitman Hart for the coveted WWE Championship. Although Hall didn't capture the gold that night, something more valuable occurred. The match convinced skeptics that this newcomer belonged in main events. By summer 1993, fan reaction had become impossible to ignore. WWE executives recognized a golden opportunity when a seemingly routine match against an unknown jobber named the 1-2-3 Kid created magic. Remember that shocking moment when the undersized underdog somehow pinned the mighty Razor Ramon on Monday Night Raw? The upset victory didn't just launch Sean Waltman's career, it provided the perfect storyline catalyst for Hall's character evolution. Instead of responding with anger, Razor showed unexpected sportsmanship. His growing respect for the young upstart who had embarrassed him transformed naturally into a full babyface turn. Fans who had been secretly cheering could now openly embrace the bad guy as one of their favorites. The former rivals even formed an unlikely partnership, teaming together against common enemies. Behind the curtain, something equally significant was developing. The on-screen partnership between Hall and Waltman mirrored a growing real-life friendship. They soon found themselves gravitating toward like-minded performers: Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, and an up-and-coming Triple H. Together, they formed what wrestling insiders would come to know as the Clique. This wasn't just another backstage friendship. The Clique quietly accumulated unprecedented influence within WWE's power structure. Their collective star power, creative input, and strategic positioning gave them the kind of backstage pull that wrestling had rarely seen before. At times, industry veterans wondered who truly controlled WWE's direction. Was it Vince McMahon or this tight-knit group of performers who protected each other's interests? How much control should wrestlers have over their own storylines? As Razor Ramon's popularity soared on screen, Scott Hall's backstage influence grew proportionally. The cool character fans adored, and the shrewd businessman behind it were both ascending simultaneously, setting the stage for one of wrestling's most consequential careers, and one of its most turbulent personal journeys. The moment Scott Hall truly cemented his place in WWE history was on October 11, 1993, when he defeated former AWA rival Rick Martel to claim his first Intercontinental Championship. It wasn't just another title change, it was validation. After years of wandering the wrestling landscape, Hall had not only found his perfect character but earned championship gold that proved his exceptional talent. But a championship reign rarely comes without controversy. When suspended former champion Shawn Michaels returned, he brought an unexpected claim. Since no one had actually defeated him for the title, wasn't he still the rightful champion? 2 championship belts, 2 elite performers, and one unprecedented solution. How would WWE determine the true champion? The answer revolutionized professional wrestling forever. At WrestleMania X, Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels climbed into Madison Square Garden and shattered expectations in WWE's first-ever pay-per-view ladder match. While modern fans might take ladder matches for granted, imagine being in that arena witnessing something completely new. What happens when two of wrestling's most innovative minds are given freedom to create without a blueprint to follow? Magic happened. Their bodies told a story of risk, sacrifice, and championship desire that transcended traditional wrestling. Each painful impact and death-defying leap served a greater narrative purpose. Though Razor emerged victorious as the undisputed Intercontinental champion, both men walked away as winners. They'd created a template that wrestlers would follow for decades to come. How do you follow up perfection? Razor's momentum carried him into a program with another Clique member, Diesel. Their contrasting styles, Ramon's technical prowess against Nash's raw power, created compelling television throughout the remainder of 1994, further elevating the Intercontinental Championship's prestige. Behind Hall's confident smirk lay a performer at the absolute peak of his powers, respected by peers, adored by fans, and pioneering new forms of in-ring storytelling that would influence generations of wrestlers. The question wasn't if Scott Hall would leave a legacy, but how monumental that legacy would become. Scott Hall's career reached a turning point after his SummerSlam 1995 ladder match with Shawn Michaels. Despite delivering wrestling classics against opponents like Jeff Jarrett, frustration quietly built as Hall watched his friends Nash and Michaels ascend to world championship status while he remained locked in the upper mid-card. The breaking point came when Hall directly approached Vince McMahon, asking what more he could do to reach the next level. McMahon's response was devastating. This was it. In McMahon's vision, Razor Ramon had reached his permanent position in the hierarchy. Meanwhile, WCW's Eric Bischoff was aggressively recruiting WWE talent with Ted Turner's financial backing. Hall wasn't just creatively frustrated. Kevin Nash revealed that financial concerns played a major role too, with both men feeling underpaid despite their drawing power. By early 1996, both Hall and Nash submitted their resignations to WWE. Their final appearance would become wrestling legend, the infamous curtain call incident at Madison Square Garden, where the Clique broke character to embrace publicly, shattering wrestling's sacred kayfabe. With his WWE contract expired and determined to prove his true value, Scott Hall prepared to make one of the most industry-altering impacts in professional wrestling history. What followed would shake professional wrestling to its core. On May 27, 1996, during an episode of Monday Nitro, Scott Hall emerged unexpectedly from the crowd. Dressed in street clothes rather than wrestling gear, he calmly stepped into the ring, grabbed a microphone, and delivered one of wrestling's most iconic promos. With his distinctive swagger, he warned WCW that he and some friends were coming to take over. 2 weeks later, Kevin Nash joined him, solidifying what fans would come to know as the Outsiders. The brilliance of this angle was its blurring of reality and fiction. Though both men were legitimately no longer employed by WWE, the storyline implied they were invaders sent by the competition. This worked-shoot approach created unprecedented buzz throughout the wrestling world. Were these actual WWE wrestlers invading? Was this real? The ambiguity fueled fan speculation and dramatically boosted ratings. Then came the moment that truly changed wrestling forever. At Bash at the Beach on July 7th, Hall and Nash promised a mystery partner for their six-man tag match. When Hulk Hogan, wrestling's biggest hero for over a decade, emerged as their ally and turned villain for the first time since becoming a mainstream star, the audience's shock was palpable. As fans pelted the ring with garbage, Hogan proclaimed the formation of the New World Order, declaring war on WCW. The NWO storyline transcended typical wrestling narratives. Its gritty realism, cool factor, and anti-establishment attitude perfectly captured the emerging cultural zeitgeist of the late 1990s. The angle was so convincing that local authorities occasionally received calls reporting real assaults when NWO members attacked wrestlers backstage. People who had never watched wrestling before suddenly couldn't look away. Behind the scenes, Hall's creative fingerprints were all over the NWO concept. His understanding of character psychology, storytelling, and what fans truly wanted to see helped craft what many consider wrestling's most influential angle. The storyline didn't just change WCW, it forced WWE to evolve into the Attitude Era and transformed how wrestling stories would be told for generations to come. But Hall's creative genius extended beyond his own character. The NWO needed a worthy adversary, and it was reportedly Scott Hall who conceived what would become one of wrestling's most iconic transformations. At his suggestion, Sting abandoned his colorful surfer persona and emerged as a silent, brooding vigilante inspired by Brandon Lee's character in The Crow. This reinvention created the perfect counterbalance to the NWO's chaos, a dark avenger lurking in the rafters, waiting to deliver justice. Before that epic confrontation would materialize, the NWO continued expanding its ranks. The faction welcomed Scott's old friend Sean Waltman, now competing as Six, further strengthening the original Outsiders core. With their growing army, Hall and Nash dominated WCW's tag team division, capturing the tag team championships an impressive 6 times. Their battles against legendary teams like Harlem Heat, the technically superior Steiner Brothers, and the prestigious Four Horsemen produced some of the era's most memorable matches. But as Hall's professional star reached its zenith, his personal demons grew increasingly difficult to conceal. The substance abuse issues that had followed him throughout his career intensified dramatically without WWE's strict oversight. What began as a controlled habit escalated into a dependency that became painfully apparent even to television viewers. His speech slurred during promos, his movements grew erratic, and his once imposing physique began deteriorating before fans' eyes. By March 1998, the situation had become so dire that WCW was forced to remove him from television entirely, mandating rehabilitation treatment. Despite the company's intervention efforts, Hall's addiction proved too powerful. When he eventually returned to Monday Nitro, the improvements were temporary at best. Fans who had cheered his character's rebellion now watched with genuine concern as the man behind Razor Ramon fought a much more serious battle outside the ring. By 1999, Hall had become nearly invisible on WCW programming, his appearances rare and concerning. In a deeply misguided decision that revealed the company's ethical bankruptcy, they attempted to monetize his struggles by rebranding him as Last Call Scott Hall, complete with an alcoholic gimmick that saw him stumbling to the ring with drink in hand. This exploitation of a man's genuine addiction marked a dark chapter for wrestling storytelling. By February 2000, following a defeat by Sid at Super Brawl 10, Hall vanished from WCW permanently. His subsequent career became a series of brief, troubled appearances. He surfaced briefly in Extreme Championship Wrestling and attempted runs in New Japan, but these stints only highlighted his deteriorating condition. Fans who had once marveled at his in-ring psychology now witnessed a performer clearly struggling to function. Wrestling seemed to offer an unexpected lifeline in 2002. WWE, having purchased WCW's assets the previous year, decided to resurrect the NWO concept with its original members. At February's No Way Out pay-per-view, Hall, Nash, and Hogan returned to WWE programming, interfering in Stone Cold Steve Austin's world title match against Chris Jericho. The resulting program between Hall and Austin held immense potential on paper, two of wrestling's most influential characters finally colliding. In reality, what could have been a dream match years earlier now felt hollow, with Hall clearly battling his personal demons throughout. Their WrestleMania 18 encounter disappointed expectations, remembered primarily for Hall's exaggerated selling of Austin's finishing move rather than for competitive excellence. Behind the spectacular character and innovative mind existed a man fighting battles far more challenging than any wrestling opponent. The contrast between the charismatic performer who revolutionized wrestling and the struggling individual behind the character revealed the profound human cost hidden beneath wrestling's theatrical exterior. After WrestleMania, the NWO storyline crumbled when Hulk Hogan unexpectedly turned babyface and abandoned the group. Desperate to salvage their momentum, Hall and Nash recruited fellow Clique member Sean Waltman once again, attempting to recapture their faction's former glory. But the angle had lost its spark. By summer, WWE quietly dropped the NWO from television altogether. For Scott Hall, the end came even sooner. On May 7th, his WWE return came to an abrupt halt following the notorious plane ride from hell incident. During the transatlantic flight returning from England, Hall's behavior reportedly spiraled out of control. Alongside several other wrestlers, his actions created such chaos that WWE executives had finally reached their breaking point. The company terminated his contract immediately. Unemployed once again, Hall surveyed a wrestling landscape with increasingly limited options. He eventually landed in the fledgling Total Nonstop Action Wrestling promotion, making sporadic appearances during their 2002 launch period. These brief TNA stints continued through 2004 and 2005, though never developing into consistent programming. The years between major appearances weren't entirely lost time. Behind the scenes, Hall engaged in multiple attempts at rehabilitation. Though lasting sobriety remained elusive, these efforts demonstrated his awareness of his condition and desire to improve. Each attempt to get clean represented a personal battle far more challenging than any in-ring confrontation. On November 1, 2007, a healthier-looking Scott Hall returned to TNA television. Fans witnessed a meaningful reunion as he joined forces with longtime friend Kevin Nash to battle the Angle Alliance. For those who had followed Hall's struggles, seeing him back in action, even temporarily, provided a glimmer of hope that the man behind the wrestler might finally be winning his most important fight. Following that brief return, Hall's reliability issues resurfaced when he no-showed scheduled appearances, severely damaging his relationship with TNA. The promotion kept him off television until January 2010, when he made a surprise comeback to form the band with Nash and Waltman, a thinly veiled recreation of their NWO Click glory days. Despite Hulk Hogan's storyline attempts to remove Hall and Waltman from TNA programming, the band continued their disruptive path, launching attacks on various roster members. Their chaos culminated on May 13th, when the reunited Outsiders captured the TNA World Tag Team Championships. However, their reign would be short-lived. By June 14th, TNA stripped them of the titles following Hall's release from the company. Once again, Hall's ongoing substance abuse problems had derailed his career. This time, however, he recognized his desperate need for intervention. In a moment of clarity, he reached out to WWE, taking advantage of their policy that funded rehabilitation for former talent, regardless of their current employment status. This rehabilitation stay revealed a shocking medical complication. After battling a serious case of double pneumonia, doctors diagnosed Hall with epilepsy, a condition likely triggered by years of alcohol abuse. This diagnosis required him to begin a daily regimen of medications to control seizures, adding another layer of complexity to his already challenging health situation. And as if that wasn't bad enough, Hall also required a pacemaker during this period, creating yet another life-threatening health concern. His survival now depended on maintaining sobriety and following strict medical protocols, a challenge that proved overwhelming. Despite his awareness of these dangers, addiction's grip remained powerful. The following years brought multiple relapses, including a frightening April 2011 hospitalization after suffering cardiac issues triggered by an overdose. In 2013, when Hall's prospects seemed bleakest, salvation arrived through an unexpected source: Diamond Dallas Page. By this time, DDP had transformed himself from wrestling star to wellness advocate, having already helped Jake the Snake Roberts achieve sobriety after decades of substance abuse. When Page extended the same lifeline to Hall, offering him residence at his Atlanta home and a chance at rehabilitation, Hall recognized this might be his final opportunity. The transformation that followed was nothing short of remarkable. Within months, the physical and mental improvements were visible to everyone. Through a comprehensive approach combining therapy, detoxification, and DDP's innovative yoga program, Page accomplished what numerous rehabilitation facilities couldn't. He helped Scott Hall reclaim his life. The wrestling community rallied around Hall's recovery efforts. Through crowdfunding, DDP raised nearly $110,000 to cover essential medical procedures Hall desperately needed: hip replacement surgery and extensive dental work. These interventions addressed years of physical neglect and helped restore not just Hall's health but his dignity. The transformation in Scott Hall was nothing short of miraculous. Now sober and healthier than he'd been in decades, he re-emerged into the wrestling world to find an overwhelming outpouring of support from fans and industry colleagues alike. His journey toward redemption reached a powerful milestone in 2014 when WWE announced his induction into their Hall of Fame under the Razor Ramon persona. On April 5, 2014, Hall received his long-overdue recognition in a deeply emotional ceremony. Surrounded by his Click brothers on stage, he delivered one of wrestling's most memorable induction speeches, his signature catchphrase, "Bad times don't last, but bad guys do," taking on profound new meaning. The celebration wasn't just about his in-ring achievements. It marked the triumph of a man who had fought his way back from the edge of destruction. Since that night, with occasional minor setbacks, Hall has maintained his sobriety. The transformation extended beyond physical health, revealing a man at peace with both his legendary contributions to wrestling and his personal journey. His pride shifted to watching his son Cody Hall forge his own path in promotions like New Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah. Hall hasn't vanished completely from wrestling. He makes periodic appearances at WWE events, typically alongside his former Click or NWO teammates. These nostalgic moments remind fans of his enduring impact, not just as a consistently excellent performer when healthy, but as one of wrestling's most brilliant creative minds who developed iconic characters and played an instrumental role in crafting the revolutionary NWO storyline that changed professional wrestling forever. Why did Scott Hall never become world champion? This is perhaps wrestling's most fascinating what-if scenario. When Hall debuted as Razor Ramon, WWE immediately positioned him alongside main event talents like Ric Flair and Randy Savage. Throughout his WWE run, he remained at the near pinnacle of the card, delivering classic matches and memorable feuds. His Intercontinental Championship ladder matches with Shawn Michaels revolutionized the industry. The puzzle pieces were all there. Hall possessed the perfect combination of size, in-ring ability, and charisma. His microphone work was exceptional, and fans responded to him whether as heel or face. Yet the World Championship remained elusive. In WWE, timing worked against him. The company was investing heavily in Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Diesel as their champions during Hall's peak years. When Hall approached Vince McMahon about advancing beyond the upper mid-card, McMahon's response revealed the ceiling WWE had placed on him. WCW presented new opportunities, but new obstacles emerged. As a founding NWO member, Hall became one of wrestling's biggest stars during the industry's hottest period. However, the spotlight often centered on Hogan, while Hall's escalating personal struggles made him increasingly unreliable. Jim Ross often said reliability was wrestling's most crucial trait for top champions. Hall's addiction issues, resulting in multiple DUIs and extended absences, made entrusting him with a world championship an enormous risk. Eric Bischoff, despite valuing Hall creatively, couldn't justify putting the company's centerpiece around his waist. The missed storytelling opportunities are heartbreaking to consider. A Hall rebellion against Hogan's leadership could have created compelling television. A championship program with Nash after the Goldberg streak ended might have elevated both men. Instead, Hall remained the extraordinary talent who never quite secured wrestling's ultimate prize. The cruel irony is that among the Click members and original NWO founders, Hall may have been the most complete performer. His combination of size, technical ability, character work, and audience connection was unmatched. What separated him from championship glory wasn't talent, but the personal demons that haunted him throughout his career. In March 2022, wrestling fans around the world were devastated when Scott Hall passed away at the age of 63. His death came after a series of health complications following hip replacement surgery. Hall had been hospitalized after suffering 3 heart attacks on March 12, 2022. These cardiac events occurred when a blood clot was dislodged during his hip surgery. He was placed on life support at Wellstar Kennestone Hospital in Marietta, Georgia, as his condition deteriorated. On March 14, 2022, his longtime friend and fellow wrestling legend Kevin Nash announced on social media that Hall's family had made the difficult decision to discontinue life support once all his loved ones could gather to say goodbye. Hall passed away later that evening. Wrestling's landscape today would be unrecognizable without Hall's contributions. Would the Attitude Era have happened without the NWO forcing WWE to evolve? Would wrestling have experienced its late 90s boom period? Hall's fingerprints remain on wrestling's DNA. Like and subscribe for 100 years of luck. Until next time.